Hello, Not Manly here, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where Jebediah is taking his first aircraft flight across the surface of Eve, getting all of our instruments ready, getting our harvesters ready, getting our engines ready, and igniting our engines. With flaps 2, it's a very, very gentle takeoff. You may have noticed I removed the swept wings and I put those wing boards back. I ended up putting a slight built-in inclination on them to give them a bit of a pitch angle already. So we've got plenty of lift, but we've shed a lot of mass and got a lot more wing. This climb is pretty treacherous though, starting off at nearly 5 atmospheres. Once we get up over the clouds, it gets a little bit more normal Kerbal-like to about 1 atmosphere. And then it becomes like flying a normal aircraft as you would back at Kerbal. These clouds are super thick. This is the stock visual and enhancements set up for Eve. Very pretty, very pink. There we go. Around 10 kilometers up, it's a little more Kerbal-like. And at 14 kilometers up, we can begin to do our surveys. Very, very easy funds if you can get out here. As we go from one contract to another, this flight takes a while. I've skipped past all the boring bits so you can see the really neat stuff. We're going from contract to contract, and it is dreadfully easy to fly this craft out here. There we go, picking our next target. Beautiful. Jebediah Kerman enjoying the skies up here and enjoying the easy funds and easy reputation. Along the way, we pick up some extra science. That storage unit there helps a lot for having to retrieve units. We don't have to go on EVAs to retrieve data. We can just tell the device to collect those. Much simpler, and we don't even need to bring a scientist along. But now we gotta try to get back to the Kerbal Space Center. The only guide we really have is that ComNet line, which tells us that we are just slightly to the left of 180 degrees to go back to the Space Center. So we'll just do that, bank ever so gently. The air, even at 10 kilometers, is about Kerbal thick, so if you're not careful, too tight a turn could snap these wings off. I am throttling back as I do this because the denser air does allow for more thrust, and if we leave the throttle as it is, we might be picking up thrust without realizing it. And then a very, very, very slow, gentle descent back through the clouds. Again, we have to be a little gentle about this, or these wings could fall apart. And then we would doom Jebediah to a rather abrupt end to his flying career. As we get through the cloud layer, I'm having trouble finding out where the Space Center is. I know it's in this general direction somewhere. Where? It was a little bit later that I started seeing the very, very outlines of the buildings and the runway. I think, yep, there it is, just coming into view now. We're starting to get some pretty high pressures here, so I start doing S-turns to bleed off speed. Just gentle back and forth, back and forth. This is being played back at 4 times regular speed, but the actual turns are very, very, very gentle. If you take a look at the controls, I am not going more than maybe half of my control input, because any more than that, I risk breaking the craft. But now we're coming in for a landing, and now that we've got all this science and completed all these contracts, I am trying to be really, really careful, making sure Jebediah lands as safely as he can. I don't even bother with the runway. The area surrounding the Space Center is flat enough that if I can land flat on that, well, I can just taxi to the runway. It's still a bit nerve-wracking though, because even though I've tested this lots of times, this is the first real landing with a nearly empty craft. The dynamics can change somewhat with an empty craft versus a full craft. And then I discovered that kind of wiggling this craft back and forth, doing gentle rolls to the left to the right, helped me shed some speed without having to do particularly sharp turns. So I'm going left and then right and then left and then right. I don't know why it works, but it works. Slowing down, I want to get my speed below 50 meters per second in case of a mishap. That crash would be survivable. Anything faster? Not so much. I got flaps fully extended, and I am really nervous here. I do not want to lose Jeb to something as simple as a routine landing. Gently, gently, gently. Come on, Jeb. Oh, 43, 42. A little bit of a flare there. And look at that. 40 meters per second touchdown. And we are safe. But hey, just because we can, I taxi over to the runway because we get full recovery of our funds for this craft if we can get to the runway. Even though we didn't land on the runway, who cares as long as we recover it from the runway. And there we go, Jebediah Kerman, our first proper flight in a proper aircraft on Eve. And we pick up 20 science along the way. And all those contracts brought in about 200,000 funds. But we do just pick up enough science to get our last Tier 4 note. There we go. And we earn enough that we can finally upgrade the vehicle assembly building. We will need this if we have any hope of launching a craft to orbit from Eve. We will need the larger vehicle assembly building. And if we're going to go to space, I want to be able to EVA, so let's upgrade the astronaut complex as well. There we go. And we have just under 100,000 funds. That should be enough to build a craft to get to orbit. Before we do that, though, we send Jeb out to both ends of the runway to plant some flags now that we have the... Whoop! Well, I was going to say now that we have the astronaut complex, we can now plant flags, but, well, we end up losing bits of our aircraft doing so. There's a rather sharp drop after there. And we've planted our first flag. We do the same thing at the other end with fewer explosions. And we get back a little bit of funds for being able to plant our first flag. We have just enough to build an orbit-capable rocket, but before we do that, we try to earn a little bit of extra funds by doing another part test out Splashdown at Eve. Now this is like the 7th attempt at launching this particular rocket. I've either went sideways and lost the bottom half, or I went too fast and it broke apart, or I went too slow and crashed. Finally, we were able to get this thing over the ocean, and I tried to make an attempt at recovering the lower stage of this. So there go the chutes for that. It does separate cleanly. And then we're able to get the chutes out on our testing pod, which just consists of a skipper engine and a heat shield to be tested splashdown, but then things started going a little wonky. You'd think 5 meters per second would be slow enough to splash down in the water, but nope, not on Eve. The whole thing just disintegrates in the water and we get jumped back out. Our testing pod had all kinds of problems too. First I had time warp set, and well, that happened. That didn't work out so hot. And then I try splashing down again from a safe, and then it just hit the water too hard again. And even better, it started sinking after that. My little testing compartment started sinking. And then it shot right back up and then exploded. So let's try again. We try splashing down on an angle this time. Nope. Nope, it falls apart again. Better look next time. Blub, blub, blub. This time I left SAS on, try to keep it as straight as I can. I'm hoping that's enough. And, well, don't fall apart, don't fall apart. Ah, it finally stays together and it splashes down safely. So we get our engine test complete. There we go. And then we do our heat shield test quickly, which we kept inside the service bay. And there we go, part contracts completed. We couldn't recover our booster, but we did earn a little bit of extra funds. And in the meantime, well, we can still earn some more money. Let's take this out. We'll put our Probodoba 9 Octo in here for an autopilot so we can send up Bob Kerman. We don't need reaction wheels there. So with the autopilot installed, we can send up a scientist. Give Bob Kerman a little bit of flight experience. Here we are doing our checks, doing our layup. Here we go. Yep, let's turn. Now, we don't have Kerbal Engineer enabled now. I realized that I left Kerbal Engineer in partless mode, so I turned that off. Now it's in career mode. Now we actually have to have an engineer module or an engineer. But hey, we don't need that for this. We're just sending Bob up to do some survey contracts. And hey, no problem. And also with the introduction of the Probodoba 9 Octo, we have KerbNet, which is that map you see there on the left. I tried to use that to try to find some new biomes based on the altitude, and I was somewhat successful. I did get a couple measurements. Here I am trying to bring Bob down safe, doing my little wiggle, and touchdown! The last temperature contracts were on the surface, and so we quickly grab those as we pass by. And there we go. Earn a little bit more funds, and then I bring it up to the launch pad, thinking, well, the runway's a little far away. Let's try bringing it up to the launch pad, see if we get our full recovery up there. And there we go, Bob, nice and safe. Hey, if Jeb can fly it, so can you. For some reason, the recovery on here was only 98%. Apparently, we need to land aircraft on the runway and spacecraft on the launch pad. And there's Bob, he got a little bit of experience. With a little more earnings of those survey contracts, we now have more than enough funds. But we'll see what we do with those in another episode. Until then, I'm not Manly. Fly safe.